Hello and welcome to this session. I'm pleased to be here. The topic today is MS Project and specifically the costs. We dealt already with the costs to see really the basics of the costs, to know what are the costs. And today I'm going to apply this to a project which is a CRM project. That project is kept simple, that people with no knowledges will be able to understand what we are doing into this project and what we are going to do with the costs. I'm Christian from Vision 6D. You can follow my channel with a lot of information, a lot of tutorials on project management, on agile methodology, and also, of course, on MS Project. So you don't have to have really knowledges knowledges about MS Project to follow the training I'm proposing right now. So we will talk first about what is a CRM. I need to switch from time to time the slides, so let me do it now. So a CRM is a software. It's a customer relation management system, and this you have it in a lot of companies. The use of a CRM software is to help follow a customer from the proposal you make to a customer, maybe even from the marketing. You do a marketing campaign, then you have people that are interested and need some contact, and this is then transferred to sale, to maybe sell something. So this is a process that can be followed by a CRM. After that, you are maybe selling some goods, and those goods they might have or need to have some support. So the CRM software is a software that covers all those areas, that does reporting, that help people, for example, at the support to know what the customer had already as a history with the company. So in my project here, what we were doing, it's to start a new project where we replaced an old system that was a legacy system with a database by a new CRM system. So you are now in the context. This is also part of digitalization of the company, of its environment. They want to have more and more information about their customers. Does this sound to you known, or is this something that you are not surprised? Yes. So this, you will see it more and more, and you already maybe work with such a system at your own organization. Behind me, you see also the plan of the project. We've done this in a predictive way, meaning that we are using a process which is the waterfall project. It means that the project is predictive. It means that we know what we want to do. We have a time frame of this project, and it's this way that I'm using it. We will see that in this project, like in any project, there is first an initiation phase. Initiation, it's when you start the project, you start to wonder about the project, you have ideas, you start to do also a bit already of costing, planning, you want to know how is the budget. So this is the initiation phase. It will be followed by a phase entitled planning. And in the planning, it's where we do really cost estimation. We define the resources we need. And of course, we do the scheduling, we analyze the risks. So this is what is happening in the planning phase. And of course, the planning phase is something that you will have all the way through the project. with of course at a certain moment where it is really intense, shortly after that you've done the initiation. You have a lot of planning to do for your project. So this is the part that we entitle here simply on that diagram or on that graph behind me. It's the part entitled planning. After the planning, of course, we enter into the real part, the real matter of the project. This is when we do what we call the execution. For a lot of people, it's then that the real project work starts. It's really then that you move and you start to go ahead with all what you have to do. In our project, there will be a phase where we do the conception. Conception, it's that we know what we want, we need to evaluate different solutions, and we will choose one solution. Once the solution is chosen, we can now enter in what we will do and perform the installation. Actually, on the diagram behind me, the installation is just one task, but I'm going to detail that task, and this is what will help us understand how we cost a project. So the execution, once we've done the installation, there are integration part, because within a company a CRM system cannot stand all alone like that. It will need to be integrated with other systems, for example accounting. You can understand that salespeople at one point they want to bill. So the CRM usually doesn't do the billing because this is part of the accounting system. So there needs to be links between those systems. So this is what we call integration. This is an integration, and for this there are usually development activities that need to be done. Once you have those integration, once the system is installed, once it is working, you will enter into a phase that is called the test. So we will need to test that system, and for this we will have testers or users that will be the testers, or future users that will be the testers. So once the system is tested, there will be some corrections of course, but I will keep it really simple. Once it is tested, we will then identify the system as being ready to go to production. This means that from that moment, that system will start to work for all the company, and all the people that were used to do previously work on the older legacy system, they will stop their work and they will just continue to work with the new CRM system. So with that, you have now an understanding of how the flow of work and activities are happening in this project. Once again, I made it really simple, really in a cascaded, predictive way that we understand. The topic today is the costs. We won't argue on activities, relations, is it really predictive, shouldn't it be agile? This is not the topic. Today, what I'm discussing with you is how we apply costs to such a project, and how Microsoft Project is going to help us in costing all that project. In the last session, we've seen how we can use the different kinds of costs that we have and we find with MS Project, and today I'm going to apply this to this project. I welcome all the people that are watching, and once again this session is open, is an interactive session, so you can ask and comment. I'm going now to move ahead. So I think you understand the different aspects of a CRM system. This is not the topic, but that you understand that it mainly helps support, get feedback on a system, do the marketing and do the sales of a system. Here you have a bigger view of what I just explained you, which is the steps and activities. You see that I have about 20 activities in this project. I won't detail all of them, but with that you have an idea. One thing that is also important to understand in this proceeding is that just behind me you have some yellow bars, and those yellow bars are the duty of the project manager in a project. The project manager is here, of course, to help the teams understand where are the issues and find solutions. And he is also here to control how is the project moving ahead. And namely, he has to control the costs of the project. Are we spending what we should spend? Are we spending more than what we should spend? And this is what I see in the two yellow bars that are just here. It's the control of the project. So, with that, I will now move and just remind you that you have three kinds of resources in MS Project, and of course three ways to cost them. I won't go any more into the detail, but it's a reminder because there are previous live sessions and previous videos that explain this really well. This is really the key topic to understand. So first of all, this is explained in French. I haven't switched to English for the moment. So the first element is work. It's based on work. The quantity of work, the number of hours that are worked, are multiplied by an hour rate, and this gives the cost of this activity. This is what we call work, and in French, travail. The second one is the material. Material in our project is something that you use in a certain quantity. It's not depending on how many hours that resource worked. It's a cost per quantity of usage of such a system. In our case, you will see that for this, as an explanation, I will use the servers that we will need during the installation to help you understand the material type of resource. Now, after the material, there is the cost. The cost resource is a type of resource where you just want to have the costs. For example, in a project like a CRM project, we need consultants. Consultants, they rate us a certain amount, and they said, okay, our intervention is 1 day and it costs that much. So it's a fixed price independently of the number of hours that are worked. So this, for example, is an example of a resource that could be defined as a cost resource. There are other possibilities. For example, you could have an insurance into a project, and this could be also a cost resource. In the construction field, for example, you have many times where you have companies or subcontractors that intervene into your project for a fixed amount. This is typically a cost resource. You don't need to know the details. You know how much this resource costs, and you are just interested by the costs. This was the reminder of those different costs that we can have with MS Project. And now I'm going to sit down and to work directly into MS Project. So I have now behind me here MS Project, and I have that CRM project that we see here. So I have already the tasks that are defined, and I have here already resources that are defined. Now we are at a stage where the planning is defined for the project, but we didn't do the costs. So to start, you see also that we have already many resources that are defined into this project. I'm just enlarging the column that you can see. And we have resources. If I take the first line here, you see, for example, the PM is the project manager. You see CMO as the Chief Marketing Officer, and then you see some engineers or stakeholders that are also taking part to this. I won't detail all the activities, but you can see that we have already defined the resources for different activities, and now I'm going to go to the resource sheet. The resource sheet, you find it by going here into the different views that you can have, and I will select the resource sheet. That resource sheet, which is here, has already all the resources that I want to use and that I was talking about that are defined. I simply key them in, and if you follow the topic on resources, then you will see how you have to do this. But I will take the first one, which is the PM, the project manager, and it's defined as a work resource. And as a work resource, you see here, we can define a standard rate. I have already defined standard rates. You see here down, for example, for the engineer, which is here. I have defined a standard rate of 100 euros per hour. It can be $100, 100 Swiss francs. For the developer that is here below, I have defined 75 euros per hour as the rate. So now you can think that we are going to define the rate for the project manager. We are going to define the rates for the other people involved into the projects. Now, I often have that question. It's that I cannot cost my project or do cost estimation because I don't know the salary of my co-workers. And if I go to the HR manager and I'm telling him that I need to know how much each individual costs, there are little chances that he will give us really that information. So we have to do without that information. But anyway, it's not related directly to the salary. This is what I want you to understand. When you go and have your car fixed in a garage, you pay the parts and you are paying for the work. And the work is at a rate, it could be 80 euros per hour, for example, for a mechanic. Those 80 euros, it's not the salary of the mechanics. It's what the mechanics cost to the company. This means all the tools, the environment, the space, the electricity, is used by the function of a mechanic. So when I'm saying here the developer is costing 75 euros, it doesn't mean the developer is getting per hour 75 euros in his pocket. No, there are social insurances that the company has to pay for the worker, for the developer. There is space where he works, there is electricity, there is a lot of material, there are trainings, there are days when you are into meetings and still this cannot be built, so there is another way where we need to build that time. So all this makes up the rate of the developer. So the right question to ask is, how much do we charge our customers for an hour of developer? How much do we charge an hour of our engineers? This is a better approach. Cost is a difference between the cost, the real internal cost of the developer, plus a margin that the company wants to make. So this is what is built to an external company. So what I want to say as a second point on this, it's not really important here in our example to know exactly the value. It is a way by which we want to estimate the costs in the project. For a first approach, I usually try to say to people, look, try to work with 3 levels. Let's say, and let's make it simple, you say, for example, 50, 100 and 150. Like that, you have people with no specialization, for example, for 50. You have specialized people like could be developers and engineers, for example, with 75 or 100. And then you will say there is the area of management, and you maybe say, okay, the chief marketing officer, the project manager, they are at that level, so it could be 150. So you keep it really simple with 3 levels. Anyway, this is an example here. So if you keep it with the 3 levels, then it's fine enough. You could then also say that maybe you have some stakeholders, they are part of the cost of the project, or they aren't part of the cost of the project. So we will leave them out to keep all this really simple here. So with that said, I think that the base for us will be 150 for the project manager. So I'm going here to add the 150 for the project manager, but before to do that, I want to go back to the Gantt chart. And into the Gantt chart, I will here add the column of costs. So I insert here the column, and I need to find the costs. And it's this one that I'm taking here. And you will see that there are already some calculations that are happening into the project. This is because we already have an hour rate for the developer and the engineers. So you see that wherever there are engineers or developers involved, we have a cost calculation that came out here on top of the calculation column. We have here also, you understand, we've taken those major steps into a project like initiation, planning, execution, realization, control, and closing. Each of those steps has defined activities. in the beginning of a project, we need really well to know what is the scope, what we are going to do into the project, why do we do that project. So it's what we define as the scope. We need also to know the people involved, interested by the project, having some influence of the project. These are the stakeholders. So you have all those different activities in the project, and any project that follows a cycle which is the predictive cycle, life cycle of a project, will find those components or steps which are initiation, planning, execution, control, and closing. So there is a video about the life cycle of a project that you can also follow and watch, and this will bring you more information on this. So that said, we have here different levels of the tasks. We worked with indentation of the tasks to make you see summary tasks. So what you see in bold, for example, like here, initiation, is the summary task where you have within that summary task define the scope, define the stakeholder. And here you can see that at the current calculation of our costs, we have here the initiation step that costs 16,000 euros. As well, you see that the planning, nothing was calculated for the planning because the resources involved, we haven't said anything what to do with the costs. Execution is mainly done by engineers and developers, and you see already that there were amounts calculated for them. When we look at the control, it's really simplified. I have written control tasks. This involves a lot of things, but I've simply written this as control tasks and management of the risks. So you see also there is one resource, which is the project manager. The project manager doesn't have any rate for the moment, so there isn't any information here concerning the costs for this part. The closing of the project is the last step in a project. It's when we meet once the project has ended and we discuss how it went into the project, what can we improve, what will we keep for the next project we will undertake. It's part of all the knowledge base that will have the company or that has this company about project management. So this is usually summarized by maybe a report and then a meeting, and really important, a celebration, because you need at some point to celebrate a project. So this said, you see that for the moment we just have engineers cost and we have developer costs. Now, one thing that we can also ask is to see the summary task. The summary task of all the project can be added to this project. It is useful because it will show us the total cost of the project. So you need to have the costs appearing, having the costs come out with the cost column, and it's also interesting, and you see here I'm relating to the show project summary task. So I simply clicked on no, I simply entered summary, and it already showed the possibility to show the project summary task. So I'm going to activate this, and you see that we have now a line 0 that came here that I will edit because it took the name of the file for this, and I will simply here insert the name of the project, which is CRM. And what is interesting to understand how MS Project is working, it's that here at the same time you see that we have in this cell the amount of the total cost of the project. So with that we see here the total cost of 54,000 euros for this project, but of course there are data missing, so it's not the real cost of the project, it's not the end cost of this project. So I'm going now to move into the project, and I'm going back to the resource sheet. Here with the resource sheet you will see that I will add, for example, the cost of the Chief Marketing Officer. I'm going to say that the Chief Marketing Officer, he will cost 150 euros. Oh, I'm at the wrong column, sorry about that. 150 euros. So we can now switch to the Gantt chart. Remember that the total cost was 54,000 euros, and we are going now to see how it moved. So from 54 it jumped to 96, and you see that this is just due to the fact that the Chief Marketing Officer is involved for quite a lot of hours into our project, and you see that it is mainly in the beginning when they do and they define the scope. And this is important to understand when you are into a project. You are dealing with a lot of stakeholders. Often in companies, your stakeholders, they aren't billed or charged to the project, but there are cases where they are. And here, if you want to know how much this really impacts the project, you can do and use that estimation of 150 euros per hour of involvement of those people. So this, for the moment, we will leave it as such. You see that we have other tasks that were now impacted by the introduction of an hour rate of the Chief Marketing Officer. We have here defined the stakeholders. It's a moment when you need to understand who is involved in the project, who has influence in the project. At the level of the costs, it's really important because you might have a financial manager, you might have CEOs that are involved or have an eye or decide of the budget of your project. So you need to have that phase in which you define the stakeholders, and of course that this is going to cost. I have examples of projects where I'm intervening as a consultant, I'm intervening as a project manager. There are projects where they prefer to have somebody external like me lead a project. First of all, because I have knowledge about the techniques and the digitalization of a company. And the second thing is that usually when we are external, we have a better contact with some people. We might also say things that people within the company don't dare to say. We can be transparent. We are there for a certain time, and people know that external project manager, once the project is done, it's also done for them. They move to something else, so they don't stay as a cost to the company. The company doesn't have to bother whether to find new activities for people which are external. So it's parentheses to make you understand and also have an insight into my job, how I intervene into companies and what I do for them. What I do here, it's mainly for administrations or IT companies or IT departments. It's mainly related to IT project, telecommunication, networking, databases, and like here CRM application systems. So this was to understand the role of the stakeholders within a project and what it is that task that is define the stakeholders. Another parenthesis, and it's about cost. You should better really well understand the scope of your project and spend time on defining the scope, because it's there that you can make a project being something successful. It's if you have a really good understanding of the scope. And this, of course, needs time, so make sure you have enough time and that the costs for this part are well covered. This will avoid you a lot of surprises later on into the project. So I welcome the people that follow this, because I know that people jump in, jump out of the project, and I want just to make sure here I'm cutting one resource to maybe make a better transmission quality. Just a second. This is when systems are live, so we have to take care of different things. So once again, you can ask questions. I have the chat that is open, and welcome. This is the opportunity to ask. So we saw now the first part, initiation. So I'm now going to go back to the resource sheet and to look at the costs of the project manager. The project manager, we are going to say, we put his rate the same as the chief marketing officer to 150. One thing that I haven't said anything at the moment is the next column, where it is overtime rate. This is a possibility if you have people working with different rates. For example, I had some projects where sometimes we needed to work on Saturdays, not because the people were lazy or delayed, but we had really to cut the system for half day. And this, of course, for some project you cannot do it while the people are working with the systems. So we had to put in some Saturdays where we could do certain tests, we could do certain moves or new versions of systems. And of course we start that work on Saturday morning to make sure that in case that it doesn't go well, and sometimes it didn't go well, we still have the Saturday afternoon and sometimes even the Sunday to continue, because sometimes there are surprises in the new versions that you are testing. So for those days, it's true that some of the engineers and developers were having an overtime rate. It's about 25% more when they work on Saturdays, and some were getting a 50% more when they had to come on Sunday. So, but in that simple project here that I'm doing with you, I'm not going to use overtime rate. So this is a long time with explanations to just have you understand how it goes. And I'm going back now to the Gantt chart. And you see immediately here that the calculation went on differently, because we had the costs of the product of the project manager that were added, and you see here up that the project cost has now jumped to 171,000. Everywhere where the project manager was involved, it has increased. You see that defining the scope, when you work with people within your company, is a step an activity that might cost a lot. In many companies this doesn't come so much out because they do a project costing in a different way. They cost what they have to buy, and they say that anyway the people within the company have to work, so we don't need to pay an extra for them. They are here, they have to do those things, they have to work on the project, so we don't do that kind of calculations. This is absolutely correct for the costs. There is this way to do it. Later on, in the coming times, there will be a live on budget, and I will enter a bit more into this topic, how to consider for a budget. And there will be two cases. The case where we cost everything, every hour spent on the project is costed, and the other way to do where work is costed as work. So you will see that, for example, in the project we need 4,000 hours of work of all the co-workers, and the cost is just the software cost, what we have to pay through bills to external companies or suppliers. So there are those different ways to do it. I'm just showing you the way where we calculate everything, also to make you understand that when you have many people involved in something, coming from different departments in an organization, this has a cost. And often these are hidden costs. We don't want them to appear, or the project manager doesn't want to have this built to his project. With that, if you have questions, they are welcome. And we will now go and add, I will now first of all check that I have here all my costs. This is correct. For the moment I have all my costs. And we said that stakeholders, we won't take them into the project, but you could do it. You could say, for example, stakeholders, they are people from the board, they are department managers, and you could add a rate for them. Now, what I'm going to do is to enter here into that part which is installation. And installation, you see that we have engineer 2, which is here. So it means that I need to define the cost of engineer 2. So you already understand. I go into the resource sheet and I'm looking at engineer 2 and I'm giving the same rate as engineer 1. If now I go back to the Gantt chart, and I'm looking to the installation costs which are here, we see that engineer 2 costs us 4,000 euros. You will also, I think I need to drink a bit. Cheers, it's water. I need here the engineer 2, and it was 4,000 euros. What I will do is that I will add some tasks. I will detail this a bit more because we need here to install servers. After that, we will need to install database, and here we will need to install the application. I will name this CRM. Okay, all those tasks which are here are part of the installation. So I will insert them under installation, and for this I ident them. Okay? And I will say the following. This is a duration of 1 day. The database is also an installation of 1 day. I made a mistake, yes. 1 day. And the CRM installation, we are going to say that this will need 3 days. Because there are different modules, that has a different complexity. And of course, I will link them sequentially, meaning that I need to do the one after the other one. So I have this, I install the servers, I install the database, and I install the CRM. Now, what I need is that to do those installations, I will need some material, and it's this that I'm going to define as resources. And for that, I'm now going back to the resource sheet. I'm going to the resource sheet, and I will define, or maybe I have already some defined. You see that I have here servers that are defined, and they were defined as type material. So I will simply show you that here you can choose the kind of resource. So I had chosen material. So I have here server, they are of type material, and you see that we have only a standard rate here, and we have here what is called a cost per use. Cost per use, it could be an installation fee that could be fixed or something like that, where the standard rate is the price per unit. So I'm going to say that each server, and I'm going to need 3 of those servers. They cost each 1,000 euros. I'm saying this because it's a simple way to look at it. If they are virtual machines or they are in the cloud, doesn't matter, we say it's 1,000 per unit. So now I'm going into the Gantt chart, and into the Gantt chart for installation of server, I'm going to define this as the server resource. So I need to find that resource, and it is here, server resource. Okay? So we have one resource that is now defined. You see that the cost here is 1,000, and you see also here between the square parentheses an indication of a single unit. MS Project, when you do it in that way, decides that it's a single unit that you are going to use. So in our case, it's not exactly right, because we want to use 3 servers. So to do that, I will go here into the task. I will get the information of that task, and I can move now to the resource, and you see that we find that the resources were defined here, servers for or VM or database. 1 unit, and the price is what we had defined in the resource sheet. So I'm going here simply to change, and you understood it already, 3 units. Pay attention to the fact that the cost here hasn't changed, but is it going to stay like that? It's a question mark, a question. So we go and we see now on our line of installing a server, we see that the price has moved up to 3000 because we are using 3 units of servers of each 1000. Okay, so I think you got it. And here you see between the square parentheses we have now defined 3 units, and you see it also here on the Gantt chart. So this is now defined. So if I go back into the information now, you see that there the cost has also changed and has adapted to 3000. This is the way that MS Project calculates. When you enter, you see the cost, you do changes. The cost is not immediately adapted. You have to go out and come back, and then the cost is adapted. So for this here, I'm going to say OK. And now we have the cost of this part. Now, the next task, install database. We are going to go back to our resource sheet, and we are defining here a resource which will be the database. Database, you would put it as material. I agree with you, you are totally right. And we are going to make it also really simple. We are going to say for the number of users, it's a 5,000 that we have to pay for this. And now, if I go to the diagram here, I can now define again the resource, assign the resource to install a database, and I have here to find where is the database. It is here. And you see that we immediately have the 5,000 that came here to be added. So we agree, just one database. This is fine in this project. Now we need to buy or to show that there is a cost with the CRM software. So here is the CRM software for the company, and we are going to say that this, with the number of users, it will be a 10,000. Like that, it's something simple. And once again, it's a resource of type material. I agree with you. We set it like that, and now I'm going to the Gantt chart. So I think no surprises. You see that the database here is the 5,000, and we don't see anything for the CRM software because we have to assign it. And I'm doing this right now, and we have now the 10,000, and we have a single unit of that system. So far, I think you understand. You say that this is just fine the way it was done. Okay, so now we like, when we work on IT project, to have a test environment and the production environment. So we will say that in fact we are going to double this. In fact, we are not going to use just one database, but we are going to use 2 databases, so we need 2 licenses, and we are going to make it simple. The CRM software, we need also a second one. So now, if I want to see how this evolves price-wise, I will simply come here into the resource and change the unit here and increase it to 2. Oops, 1.5. It's difficult to understand what is 1.5 of a database. So I will change this to 2. Okay, and the CRM software, I'm also going to add it and to say 2 units. So we see that the prices, they have doubled here. We could say we use the same servers or we double the servers. I will make it really simple. We double also the number of servers. So I come here into the servers and I'm going to move this to 6 servers. It's also one way to understand how quickly you start to have a lot of servers into a project. So with that, we have now the kind of material resource, and I will add an additional task here, and I will name this the installation external. It will be done by a consultant, and this will last the 5 days, and I need now to define a resource. And for this, the consulting company has made us a flat fee of 5,000 euros. So I need to define a resource, which is the consultant, and I don't care if there is one consultant or two, depending on the specialty, who is going to come. I outsource this to a consulting company. So all what I care about is the cost. So I'm going to say that the consultant here, they are a cost resource, because I'm not going to deal into how many of them are coming that day. Maybe the next day one more will come, the third day another one. I don't want to. All what I want to know is that it will cost me a 5,000. So for this now, I'm going here to the Gantt chart again, and into the Gantt chart I could do it in a really easy way. I could say here that the consultant are assigned to this task. It is done, and you see that the cost hasn't evolved here. We still have 0 as cost. And what I will now do is to go here into installation. And once again, I take the information out of it. I go into resources, and you see that here I can directly define the cost. And I can define here my 5,000. So I have here now as a cost resource, and you see that we don't have here on the resource a number of units, but we rather have an amount, a price, which is what this resource costs us, since it is a cost resource, and it has been added to the rest of the installation. So all these installation steps, they will cost us 45,000 euros, because we have one engineer that is internal to the company for 5 days, and we need different material resources here, the server database, the CRM application, and we have an external company that comes in to do that installation work, which I specified here with the consultant that is here as a cost resource for 5,000 euros. So we see that we have here those costs that are covered. So we see that now the cost of the project is 232,120 euros. So that level, the 120, you can leave it aside, but it's a calculation. So with that, there is one activity I think that hasn't been calculated. It's the activity 18 here, which is training. So training, it's that once we have tested everything, we should train our users that are moving from the legacy system to the CRM. So we have scheduled 2-day training, and once again, this is an external company that will come and do the training. They have agreed to do that training for 4,000 euros. So my question to you now is, how should I define this? Shall I define a training resource, or maybe a trainer resource for 4,000? What do you think? Once again, hello to all those that are participating or just jumping in. It's a pleasure to see that people are following. Yes, it's interesting to see this, and it pleases me a lot. So what I want to say, it's welcome. You can answer the question or comment or ask or say hello. It's the opportunity to do that. So I think you've chosen to go back to the resource sheet, and let's admit we define a trainer. And I think that you have different possibilities, but I think the easiest is to define the trainer as a cost resource. And this cost resource, we will now assign it to the tasks. So for that, I go to the training activity, which is here, you see, and I will define the trainer as a resource. So the trainer is defined, there are no costs. Normally, I would tell you to go into here the information, as we did it with the consultants. You go to resource and you key in here a cost. I'm going to do it in a different way simpler, and it's how I started to work with cost with MS Project. It's that directly here in the cell, which is here, you can key in your 4,000. It's a possibility. It's really simple. I didn't show it as first because sometimes it has drawbacks. You want to change those costs and MS Project keeps them. So you can do it, but the way I showed first is the preferred way. So I'm keying here the 4,000, and you see that we have here that part that is defined as 4,000. And this has increased the cost of the project, that is now 236,120 euros. This is the cost of the project. You see that here this task, which is the go to production, this task is a milestone, so it doesn't have a cost, it's a date in fact, that I want to be present, that we know that by this date we should enter into production. So you see also I haven't discussed the control part, but since we had defined that the project manager was doing those tasks, what I did is I had defined the resource project manager here. I will open now the control task, that you understand how I've done it. I said that part of the task, it's not 100% of the time of the project manager, but it is rather a 10% of the project manager time. So you can here reduce the units of a resource by giving a certain percentage. Usually into project we consider, depending on the area of the project, depending on the industry, 10 to 15%. There are areas where it's 20%, there are areas where it's much more. It's a full-time job doing controlling and all this, depending also on the size of the project. So here It's the way by which I have defined the project manager. To let you see, if I would say here that it is 100% cost of the project manager, here it didn't immediately change, but we will go here. Yeah, I have a resource issue with over allocation, so I have to go back. Sorry about that, but this is not what I want to destroy into my project right now. So I wanted to make you happy, but we'll keep it to 10%. Okay, so we keep it like that, but if you are doing the project at the same time, you can also adapt it on your issue. It's just that it's a longer thing to go, and I need more time to do that, and I see that I'm nearing the end of the session. So with all that, with all what I've said, you've seen in a project that is for me a project on which I have worked. I had the function as a technical manager into that project, and I was leading the project. It was a project that was much more expensive than the one we just calculated here, because we had a huge phase of data migration that I didn't show here inside. The project I'm talking about, the amounts, the cost of the total project was around 3 million euros. So project management function was a function that was full-time on the project. So